I am host for your session today. Our topic is experiences and expectations from online schooling. Online schooling has been a hot topic of debate. Messy, shambolic, Twitter storm, revolution, evolution are the kind of words which one reads in news articles. On the other hand, there have been some pleasant changes as well. It has not been easy for anyone. Education is a very emotional issue. Online is well accepted, banks, movies, and now shopping, but online schooling is new for everyone. It is an uncharted territory and it has happened suddenly. And things are not perfect. In fact, they will go wrong in these experimental days. We have finest pioneers in the field here today. In India, over 75% of the schools are government schools. So online schooling that we see is being attempted in possibly less than 1% of the schools today. But it is the hottest topic of discussion. These people here have worked hard day and night to get the first version of online schooling going. Their continuous hard work and perseverance will see it through for themselves and for others. I'm reminded of a poem, लहरों से डर कर नौका पार नहीं होती, कोशिश करने वालों की कभी हार नहीं होती, नन्ही चींटी जब दाना लेकर चलती है, चढ़ती दीवारों पर 100 बार फिसलती है, आखिर उसकी मेहनत बेकार नहीं होती, कोशिश करने वालों की कभी हार नहीं होती. I am sure the relentless work, learnings and leadership of our panelists here will benefit all of us. I will now hand over to Ashwath, who will moderate the session today. Ashwath has been working with low-income and government schools across India over 10 years, and I'm sure all of us will have a great session today. Over to you, Ashwath.
Thank you, Sanjay, and again, good evening, everyone. It's just amazing to see the different teachers and educators who have joined us from different parts of the country, different schools, right? This is really exciting. I feel quite grateful for having this opportunity to facilitate this conversation with such esteemed panelists on the changing times when it comes to schooling. As Sanjay said, I work with Teach for India. I run Teach for India's online teacher training platform called as Firki. And I'm really excited to get us started. What we are going to do is actually, we're going to quickly hear from each of our panelists, right? Diksha, maybe you can start us off. Just if you can quickly just take a couple of minutes, 2 minutes maybe, to talk a little bit about yourself and your schools. After you, we'll then go to Ravi, and then Anshul, and then to Anthony. And from there, we'll then start moving more in this conversation. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Ashwath. Namaste to everybody present on this webinar. I am Diksha Kalyani. I am the director of the Kalyani School in Pune. I got interested in education as it is a philanthropic initiative of my family. I come from the Sri Ram family in Delhi, where education was always considered very important. My mother started the Sri Ram schools in Delhi, and that is how I got the passion. 5 years ago, I started the Kalyani School in Pune. Even though Pune is known as the Oxford of the East, when I got married and came here, I realized that the schools over here are still very traditional. People still had mostly convent education as an option for schooling. And I really believe that schooling has to be a lot more child-centric. It should look at overall development. And that was something which was lacking. And that is why, I was very keen to start the school. And, in the last 5 years, looking at the way admissions have happened and children have been coming to our school, I know that we are on the right path.
Thank you so much, Diksha. Thanks so much for sharing that. Ravi, over to you. If you could also share a little bit about yourself and the schools you run.
Ravi, you're on mute.
Yeah, sorry about that. So I was just saying thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you. So my schooling journey actually started, I would say, in my mind many years ago. It started from my school days when I really wasn't considered to be a good student. I struggled quite hard. Till my 10th grade, it was not great at all. But 11th and 12th, some magical thing happened and I got into an IIT. So, if I reflect back, there were certain things that were there as a part of the education system that really did work for me. Now, I loved my school, I loved my teachers, I loved my friends, but the system as such didn't really work. Fast forward many years, and my first job was in Tata Steel. I learned a lot from the Tatas, and I realized that my own existence is not just because of my excellence alone, but because of the entire society around me. And somewhere around that time, this whole thing started about doing something in the area of education, again, connecting it back to my earlier experience. But at that time, of course, I was pretty young. It was my first job. But many years later, things started to work out. We had kids, we saw them grow up. We got interested very much in the Montessori system. I realized the hands-on learning concept, the child-centric methodologies were very, very useful. And those inspired us to start our first Montessori schools. So today we have 3 schools. The latest one is a CBSE school. It is located here in Bangalore. And yes, so we have about 1,000 students in the school. And we have a very interesting experience that I will share about in terms of how we went online and what really worked for us. But that's a little bit of a story about me.
Thanks, Ravi. Thank you for sharing that. Anshul, if I can request you to come on and share a little bit about yourself and your network.
Thank you and good afternoon to all. My name is Anshul Pathak, and I normally introduce myself as a former banker. I used to be working with Citigroup in New York till 2007, and I spent about 10 years with them. And then the India calling came to me for various reasons. Everyone has their own. I can say, thank God I'm back in India. Otherwise, I would have had an H1 issue in the current days. So India calling came, and 2007 I came back. And as far as the institutions go, the schools that we started were started in 1980. And we started from a city called Ghaziabad, which is outskirts of Delhi. And in those days, literally, Ghaziabad had no good school. And I remember that during the time that my father was posted there, we had to go to Delhi to attend a decent school. So 1980, we started the Delhi Public School Ghaziabad Society. Today we have 10 schools, and among the 10 schools is a school called Selaco International School, which is a residential school. And my reasons, for being in education, initially purely by accident, I actually came and started working in skilling. But then over time, I realized that it's an area where you can impact millions of lives, and it really enriches one's own quality of life. So that's where I am. That's where I've been for the last 10 years. And we'll come to the online transition, but it's been a very enriching decade to be in education.
Thanks, Anshul. Yeah, we'll be moving towards the online transition very soon. Over to you, Anthony.
Hi, good evening to everyone. My name is Anthony Nilesheri, and I'm working presently as Chief School Excellence in Bharati Foundation. Of course, I have started my career as a teacher way back in 1995 in Northeast. And when Anshul was talking about Ghaziabad, the issues that are there, we were looking at in Indira villages of Manipur, where there was absolutely no transport. We had to walk 24 hours to go to the nearest city and where we can get something. And with regard to Bharati Foundation, we are into school education in a special way. We have our own greenfield schools, 183 schools as of now, reaching nearly 38,000 children. We also support government school program And we support more than 800 schools of government schools in 14 states of India. And our own program is running in 6 states of India. And all our school programs are in the rural area. And definitely the topic of the day is very interesting because the connectivity is going to be more challenging and interesting at the same time in the interior villages. So looking forward to this discussion more.
Thank you so much. I think if anybody has been in the education sector for the last 5 to 10 years, it's highly unlikely they haven't heard of either the TPS network or the Kalyani School or the Foundation School or Bharti Foundation. I think the collective experience of this panel is just amazing. And to understand and to also know that this is going to be perspectives not just from urban schooling but also from rural schooling. I think that's going to make this very exciting, and at the same time the challenges are also going to be quite real. Before we move into the question around how did you all transition to online schooling, how has COVID per se affected the way your schools have functioned, I want to quickly roll out a poll to our audience. Right, just want to get their thoughts on how are they looking at supporting online classrooms. So I'm just launching the poll. The poll will appear in front of your screens. We'll give all of you around 45 seconds to respond to this. I see people have started responding already. The movement towards online schooling is going to be very interesting, and it's going to look very different for primary, middle, secondary school. And that's why I think Sanjay suggested let's get started by first getting to know what the audience are thinking about this. Take another 10 seconds and we'll end the polling. Yeah, there you go. So panelists, this is just for your information. Just time and again in between, we will just quickly release a poll just to get a gauge of who our audience, who our participants are as well. And of course, the participants request you to continue to put down your thoughts in the chat window. You also have something called as Q&A, where you can post questions, which we will come to towards the second half of this webinar. So really excited to learn from everyone now. And let's get started. Actually, Anshul, if you can start us off with the next question on what has been your experience of online today, especially during the last 3 months.
How much time do I have? Then I'll...
Couple of minutes, maybe.
So needless to say that it hit us like a wave. You know, it was shock, absolute shock. The disease is coming, you know, numbers are growing. But the day we decided that we actually have to shut offices from tomorrow, we actually have to shut schools from tomorrow, you know. So that was a complete shock. And it affected both personal life and work life. So a couple of days, one had to get over that. I've had instances where, unfortunately, some people that I know that I work with in senior leadership positions were actually sick during that time, and they were extremely scared, you know, to be sick, to have fever of 102 or 103, which is actually normal. But during that time, on the 19th or 20th of March, they literally felt that they were going to die. So what we thought that, or what I thought that what was most important was, as we kind of thought through out of this situation, first thing was to keep in touch with people. It's 4:15. You know, one kind of keeps on talking to people to ensure that everybody's kind of okay, and then strategizing how to reset the entire organization, including the schools, for online management. Another thing that kind of I would say worked for us was slowly started to prioritize the tasks. So what was very, very important, very essential, and what wasn't so essential. And then we came into online learning. Now, when we came to online learning, um, we have 10 schools, and everyone was experimenting a little bit. And at that time, we did not have confirmed software to use for online learning because we were not doing online learning. So uh, I'm happy to share with you very transparently. Some schools started with partial WhatsApp. Some schools started with using Google Classrooms, and it was about 3 or 4 days into this lockdown that we realized that we have the license for Microsoft Teams also, and then we compared Teams to Google Classrooms, and we took a call that we would migrate to Teams. The next 3 weeks was very intense understanding of how to use Microsoft Teams, both for administrative purposes and administrative meetings, and also for the academic and classroom. So the entire month of April, I would say, I mean, in fact, we're still learning. I won't say that we've stopped learning. We're still learning, but the real learning for us on this platform was the last 10 days of March into the entire month of April. Some bit of May also went in. And now we are fairly organized on Teams. We are recording sessions. We're able to conduct all kinds of delivery of subjects across the classes on Teams. So, building an academic calendar, building a discipline around when classes start and when classes end. And of course, another thing that caught us as we were trying to grapple with this situation, which I believe a lot of other people also uh, did, was that how many hours do you teach? The whole issue about screen time. Initially, we started with less exposure, then we increased the exposure, and then kind of came back to what was more acceptable. As we speak right now, our teacher training is going on. More than 800 teachers are being trained in-house on this platform on Teams across 10 schools, and that's been going on for now nearly about 10 days. So we have been able to leverage this platform for teacher training as well. We are revamping we have not only used this time and this crisis as an opportunity to get onto blended learning, but we are also trying to tweak our own curriculum. We are trying to reduce the time spent uh, uh, in teaching and trying to increase the time spent on self-learning. So we're trying to change how the learning actually happens or will happen in our schools. So we're trying to push towards more self-induced learning across classes.
Amazing.
Apart from this, you know, on the administrative side, it was about how to manage 10 campuses without being there. The upkeep of campuses, the land and building issues, the vendor issues, realizing that there was a storm last night and something blew over, the wall fell down. So those were some other mundane kind of issues, and managing and keeping in touch with the various government departments who kind of became, I would say, overactive and very keen to sort out the issues of private schools during this time. So it's been I would say that it's unfortunate that this crisis came, but
Yeah.
it created so much of an opportunity. And we have, I believe, not only we, but I think most organizations, most people have stretched beyond what they would have in any normal circumstance. So we also have evolved, and I hope and I'm sure that whatever learnings we've taken, we've created, we will be taking them in the future, and of course benefit all learning for all children in the future.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I think those are all important points, especially around, making sure you're over communicating and staying in touch with people during this time. The strategic choices of seeing what kind of online management is important. And I think the point around screen time is as well is very real. I'll actually move on to Diksha here, and it'll be great if you can share a little bit about how the Kalyani school has kind of moved online, if it has. And also, Diksha, here there's a specific question I'm also just quickly adding in within that same couple of minutes time, is that you had mentioned about about how there was a little bit of disappointment with convent school type of education. How do you see online learning kind of, deal with some of those challenges which convent school education had? This is actually coming from one of our participants as a direct question to you.
Okay. See, I don't want to denigrate the convent education, but it was, what I saw in Pune was that it was only about academics. There was never any, children went to school only for to study. Sports was not given importance. Extracurriculars were not given importance. So my belief is in a balanced all-round education, because not every child is meant to do well academically. There are other children, and especially in these days, when there are so many career opportunities available to children, why should they only be marked based on their assessed based on their academics? So that was this thing. I know that online. I don't want to repeat what Anshul said. We also literally within 2 days of getting to know that schools had to shut down, we started Google Classrooms. We took the summer break, the initial month of April when we were holding classes, as well as the summer break, to do more research on what works. And we've also realized that Microsoft Teams is the best application, and it's really working well. There are still loopholes, and I think it just takes time for both the teachers as well as the students and parents to understand the best way to make it work for them. There will be problems and issues which will keep cropping up, but I know day by day we are making improvements, and there will be a time when everybody is going to say, okay, now this is just right and it's working very well. And I hope that isn't the time that when schools can reopen just as we get it right. But having said that, I think there is no option but online schooling for the near future. I don't see schools being safe for with the number of cases going up day by day. I think it's going to be another 2 or 3 months that we are going to have to continue with online schooling. The biggest challenge is we have RTE students also. So for them, dealing with a system like Microsoft Teams is a little difficult. So for them, we've even been sending WhatsApp messages and videos, and teachers making special calls to those students, because we really feel that they also deserve to get the best possible education and not be denied that.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. In fact, one of the things we've discovered is that till 3 months back, everybody would look at technology as the great enabler, the equalizer. And in the last 3 months, we've actually seen how technology has become a big divide when it comes to student learning, not just depending on the income backgrounds, but I think when we come to Anthony next, he'll probably talk about how the divide is in rural areas as well. Thank you, Diksha.
I'd like to add here when I was saying that even through online education, we've made sure that we're giving an all-round development here also, because we have continued with the co-curricular classes, whether it's art, drama, music, dance, all that is also happening online.
That's amazing. If there's a way we can get a sneak peek into some of this in the future, it'll be a great learning for all of us.
Definitely.
Thank you so much, Diksha, for responding to that. And Anthony, I'd like to go to you next. I mean, what Bharti Foundation is looking at is not just online transition, but online transition in big scale and across different geographies. How has it been playing out for you all in the last 3 months?
Yeah, it has been quite a really roller coaster ride, I would say, from that point of view. Earlier speakers were talking about 10 campuses, 20 campuses. We are looking at 183 campuses, only ours. And we are looking at another 800 campuses plus in terms of government schools. So as I think Diksha already mentioned partly about the connectivity issue that faced, especially in the rural area. I'm sure it's also some issues in some parts of urban area as well. So apart from connectivity, there is also another issue of the data plan of the parents, or the phone of the parents as well. So not necessarily the data plan is sufficient to continue all this online activity for the whole month. So there is a kind of a double impact. So though we say there is a lot of connectivity, maybe 50 or 60% connectivity in the rural area for us in a special way from a rural perspective, actually it is not 60%. It is still down, especially for the whole month if you look at it. But for Anshul and Diksha, MS team worked. But for us, what worked is another team, our team of teachers. Our teachers have done us so proud. Our Satyabharati school teachers, which is in 6 states, they have turned around that they can manage even without MS Team and Zoom and other platforms that were there. Because they realized very fast that children are not able to, first of all, access to the technology, especially if the parents are not there in the house. And if they come at the different times. I think these are one of the learnings that I heard from our learnings from my own teachers that we had was, we had teachers using WhatsApp, which is supposed to be asynchronous learning, used it as a synchronous learning method. And we also shared this with our partner in Delhi government project as well. So what worked for us is, as I think Ashwath was saying, it's not exactly the technology, it is the team of teachers who have really turned around the available technology to us. So we had about 50 to 60% approximately connected through WhatsApp. So our own Satyabharati school teachers had about almost 1200 WhatsApp group. So as to, and many of us were into some of the groups so that to see how we can enable and help the teachers. And remaining 30-40% teachers used to call up over the phone because they don't have internet connectivity. So it was much more painstaking from the level of teachers to engage the students. As Diksha already mentioned, we did not start with, of course, she said both academic and non-academic, but in our case, we did not start with academic lessons straight away. We started engaging with the students, various competition, various events, various activities. We ran something called Satyabharati Skill Fest. Whatever the skill that is possible, let us get it out of our children. And teachers did a very good job, and our students, I think they also bagged a lot of awards, external competitions as well. So it is after this, we started slowly reinforcing the learning of the previous year in some of the competitions, and so that they are able to do in the new academic year. And we just started also some of the chapters, since many of the places textbooks have not reached as on April. We had to do it again through ebooks and few short videos, short voice note, I would say. So some of the things that has really helped us is teachers' commitment to school education, and also multiple use of technology, whether it is internet or voice call for that matter. And the amount of percentage that we have not been able to reach in our schools, though it's connectivity is an issue, it's about 2 to 3% of children. So definitely we have used this as an opportunity for investing in teachers in terms of various teacher training. Yes, we are also using various platforms, but it is more for teacher training rather than approaching the students. We don't want to increase the digital divide too much, but at the same time, we want to ensure the learning continues and the engagement continues. That's how we are settling down in this new normal.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I think what you've touched upon, that the actual innovation is happening within people and how they are working, I think that's really crucial to address. And I also resonated with how you've used the existing systems and built that habit of online learning, didn't directly jump into academics around it. Thanks so much for sharing about that. Ravi, before I come to you, I'm going to also give you an additional piece of information. We're going to quickly run another poll. And this poll is basically to get a quick test from the audience on have they participated in any online class. So we also know what's been the experience so far. So quickly, everybody, there's a poll that's appearing on your screen right now. If you can take the next 30, 40 seconds to just share, have you been part of an online school or a class, either as a teacher or as part of your child's education? It'd be great to know if you've already had an experience in this. Fifteen more seconds. So there are the results. Like it seems like almost 92% of those who've participated have already now been part of this format. So in many ways, I think there's some experience or some testing of waters that's happened. It'll be good to know from you, Ravi, now, like in terms of the foundation school itself and the 3 schools that you're running, how have you all seen this transition to online learning? How have you approached this?
So, life has this very funny way of, putting together things. I've been through 2 recessions earlier. Both times we were caught on the back foot. So one was the dot-com bust that happened, and the second was the Lehman Brothers. So since then, we've been extremely sensitive to any event that could impact our work. Interestingly, and by the way, me and my wife, the 2 of us are co-founders of this school. So we both were already becoming sensitive to the news that was emerging in January itself regarding the spread of COVID. And by the end of Jan, early Feb, we already noticed what China did, what Japan did, what South Korea did in terms of schooling. And we were pretty sure that the same thing is going to happen in India. The first thing they do is they shut down educational institutions. So it was only a matter of time. And the minute we realized that, we put everything into action. Now, 2 other things came into place. One is I have a technology background. I worked in technology for dog's years. I'm a true believer in that. I was a proponent of ebooks when people were saying it is going to be really bad for everybody. And the other thing is I have a lot of experience in the BPO industry. So all of these actually came together beautifully. So by mid-Feb, we had already sent all the kids back home with their bags and books and everything. Towards the end of Feb, we were already ready to conduct online exams. And end of Feb, we also started conducting online classes. So which means all the background work in terms of training teachers, at least part of the content, selecting the technology, everything was already in place. We moved at a pace that was unbelievable actually. And all of this happened before the lockdown even was announced. Because we were fairly sure it is going to happen. We didn't know the word is called lockdown. We knew that schools will be shut. That much we knew. So by the time the lockdown actually took place, we were actually fairly comfortable. Teachers were already conducting classes online. We knew how to conduct exams online. We even knew how to give admissions online. The technologies were all explored. Everything was actually done. The challenges were there, of course, because we had just gotten started. What we needed to do was repurpose our entire content that we had for this new medium. So I think the last time I worked this hard was in my high school, in my 11th and 12th. So the last about 3 months was exceedingly, I would say, intense for us and for our teachers. We were, because, it's not just about scanning a textbook or putting, tons of text in a slide and showing it. It's a lot more. It's a much more involved process. So we got very busy with that. Then you have your entire, what is the right format? So what should be the structure of your timetable? Screen time is a big talk right now. So that is something we thought about. What kind of hardware do at least our set of parents have? What kind of bandwidth do they have? And like Diksha said, we do have some RTE students. And what is it that they are going to, experience? What kind of technology problems? So this is where some of my tech background and a bit of BPO background came into place, and we put together some solutions. Then you've got your entire operational challenges. So once you start off your class, some very simple things happen, right? Your students have logged in, but the teacher is not able to log in. What do you do? Right? Do you waste 10 minutes? Where should the teacher go? What are you doing to enable the teacher to make sure he or she logs in the right way? So we put a lot of things in place. For example, in the BPO industry, there's something called workforce management, and there's a whole structure around that. So it was fairly easy for me to port that because I knew how it works. I know exactly what happens behind that. And as you know, in the BPO industry, again, it's all remote work. So in that sense, this is remote. So that's why I said, you know, it's funny how life brings together so many of your experiences that I was actually able to use out here. Did we have surprises? Plenty of it. The two big surprises were the government themselves. As you know, in Karnataka, we've had issues regarding fees and banning of education, which we're still, there are cases going on. So those are issues that we have to deal with. But otherwise, I think we've I guess, managed it in a reasonably good way. And yeah, I feel pretty happy and satisfied during this time as compared to the last two recessions.
Thank you so much, Ravi. In fact, it'll be great if there's some kind of a steps or a way for, you know, schools to make this transition, much like you and the rest of the panelists, and if there's a way you can guide them as well. But as I was listening to the different panelists, I think two things are just coming to me. One is that it's so important for our teachers to also start looking at the way they are learning. Only then they'll be able to facilitate something similar for the students. I think Anthony spoke about how the focus has been in getting teachers to first learn and participate online. And maybe over time, there's a natural transition with students. And the second is, I remember a few years back reading this quote saying that technology will never replace teachers, but teachers who don't use technology will be replaced by those who do. And suddenly these 3 months have kind of fast forwarded a lot of, you know, what the implications of that quote was. I'll move forward with it. I think there's a lot of double clicking that's required as you guys were sharing. We've got a lot of questions coming in from participants. I request you to keep adding your questions. We'll soon be coming to all these questions as well. In fact, Ravi, one of the questions was around government banning online education for primary schools. I'm going to come back to you shortly on that. But again, Diksha, if you can start us off with this next piece, like, what have been like 2 or 3 difficult choices that you had to make this transition, and what has come easy? And I think one of the panelists also spoke about, you know, just the importance of the human capital you're working with. How have parents, teachers, and students responded to this change?
Ashwath, I don't think there was any choice. We realized that we have to start online teaching immediately because we didn't want our children to lose any time, because especially in March, April, we had already decided to have classes for our 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th students, because time is of the essence for them especially. And we didn't want a situation where, you know, their curriculum gets into backlog. And typically, in fact, even now, CBSE has not let us know what changes in curriculum there will be, how much course will be cut. So we don't want at the end in October, where, you know, when the children normally start giving their pre-boards, or this thing that we're lagging behind with their syllabus, because it's a matter of their, you know, futures. So we decided to jump into online teaching immediately. So it started with the senior grades, and within a week, beginning of April, we were ready to start with junior school also. And I really don't understand how, you know, with the uncertainty that there is, how governments can say that, you know, don't have online classes for pre-primary children. Each day when they don't revise what they have learned previously, the longer the gap between what they have studied previously to what they will study next, the longer that gap becomes, the less likely they are to retain what they have learned before. So, you know, you're just going to add to their learning gaps, and somewhere down the line, it's going to catch up. You know, learning is sequential. What you learn in grade 1, you go to the next step in grade 2, next step in grade 3. So it's not that, you know, if you've skipped grade 1, it's fine, you'll learn in grade 2. There's no logic to that, you know, it's okay, we won't have online classes for 6 months and then they'll catch up after that. So, you know, I really feel that there was no choice. Hats off to, you know, as Anthony said, hats off to the teachers who were willing to make changes in their way of teaching, because it's not easy. A lot of teachers are not comfortable with technology. There are a lot of teachers who are in their 40s, 50s, who aren't, who were never trained to use computers, use laptops, use Microsoft Teams, or, you know, so they have been very open-minded and have been willing to make the change. And I think that's something which will have long-term benefits. And also, there is something which parents are not understanding when they say, you know, that the teachers aren't coming online or they're not spending enough time. Teachers, when they were on lockdown, also had families to look after, also had their own homes to look after, and at the same time, they were teaching other children. So somewhere that there was this insensitivity that a teacher's job is to teach and, you know, not to do anything else. So I think parents should realize that, you know, they have to give a lot more respect and appreciation to teachers.
Absolutely. I think sometimes it goes very undervalued because you don't see the impact of somebody immediately. And I've heard both, Diksha. One is parents saying that now we've become full-time teachers, to teachers actually saying that where is the time for us when we are also working from home and we have our children as well. And it's interesting you brought in the point around online education for elementary specifically, and to start off that chain of conversation. So I'll actually move next to Ravi again. Ravi, if you can talk about what has been difficult choices, what's come easy, how have parents and students and teachers responded? And more importantly, being based out of Bangalore, I think even the Karnataka government has had a guideline saying that till grade 5 and maybe till grade 7, they don't want to go with online classrooms. What's your take on this? How do people advocate for what's right at this time?
So again, there is a interesting background to this whole thing. There are two sets of people. There are some who say, look, you know, this is not a good thing. Online education is not good. And there are a whole bunch of others who say, you know, this is the way to go forward. I am biased, obviously, towards saying that, look, we need to go for online education. Firstly, there is no choice right now. Secondly, as Diksha said, the young mind is actually a pretty agile mind. You know, the neural connections that they make at a young age, those connections are made very fast, but they are also broken very fast, right? I remember when I was really young, 3-4 years of age, I could speak Kannada really, really well. And then my father was in Air Force, we moved out and I forgot. I didn't know Kannada. Then after many years when we got back, I had to relearn it, but it was not the same, right? So from my perspective, learning has to be continuous at a young age. Any break is going to be detrimental to the child. And there are a lot of parents who believe what I believe. Now, coming to the government part of it, I honestly don't know and I can't comment why they did what they did. I can only agree or disagree. I disagree with what they have done. I feel it is going to be detrimental. We have very good examples where governments have planned. We have the Kerala government, we have the Delhi government. They have proactively planned for the education of the population. If the planning was done right, there was no reason why we couldn't have reached our entire population. There are many other things you can learn from other fields. I'll give you another example, right? Long ago when the telecom industry was coming up, the government came up with a very interesting element. What they told the telcos was that, look, if you're going to be applying and if you're going to be bidding for these profitable urban circles, you need to take up some rural circles also. They made it mandatory, right? And the telecom company still made a lot of money and telecom spread to rural areas. So a good policy decision can actually do magic, in terms of spreading education. So some policy decisions like this could have been made. I, for one, we have a lot of experience. I got a lot of hands-on experience in conducting online classes. We would love to share. So many others. I mean, Anthony has done so much research. Diksha, Anshul, and like us, there are hundreds of other schools who have done a lot of research. We've got tons of data. It is our country. We are free to, we are absolutely willing to share this and bring others on board. But honestly, I don't believe banning is the solution. Planning and enabling is what I think we should do. Why they did what they did, I don't know. So.
Fair enough. Thanks for sharing that. It'll be great to see that actually play out, where schools are kind of leading that way of the conversation, the innovation. I think Diksha touched upon this point about how teachers in the end are the ones who are executing this, and their well-being is also something that needs to be considered. I'll come to you, Anthony, quickly for you as well, right? What were the choices that were difficult, or as the previous panelists have shared, there was no option to have a choice? And what's come easy? How have parents, teachers, students responded to these changes from your experience?
In fact, whenever I've talked to my team, whether the non-teaching staff or even the teachers whom I talk over the various platforms, what I feel or what I really feel and believe what has happened is there has not been a lockdown. We have unlocked a lot of opportunities at this time. That's what I feel. So this lockdown has been unlocking many potential for us. So I do agree with Diksha when she says, I think there was no choice. So the point that you were earlier mentioning, whether EdTech is required, not required, now there is no more discussion on EdTech. Okay, now let's go into online. In the beginning, when you find many of the so-called EdTech remained in the classroom, which were shut. But unfortunately, it did not take place into online education. It took some time, I'm sure, even for private school education, elite schools where had a lot of EdTech into their smart class, into their classrooms. It took some time for them to readjust to it. Somehow the EdTech was tuned to transfer the blackboard teaching into whiteboard teaching. Not necessarily, it was an online education. Online education, there are very few schools in the country who are doing it through the point of LMS, learning management system, and also from a self-paced mode. There are very few, maybe 2%, 1%, or maybe even less than that. And every school had its own challenges, whether it is private school or government school or the schools which are in rural area versus urban area. So what I've seen, the challenges has been used as an opportunity. Like I think Anshul or Ravi, I forget, they were talking about online admission. So those schools did not have a kind of an online platform, many of these things. They use Google Form. In our school, Satya Bharati School, we use Google Form as enrollment form because it has been always a hard copy. So our teachers started sending Google Form to all the parents who are there. So the online has been accepted. And I think Anshul earlier mentioned, the blended approach has to be there. Now there is no way of looking back, should we go for online or not? This particular situation that we are in, lockdown or post-lockdown situation, we are going to have online requirement. We are not going to be, as it was in the beginning, like a normal. All students may not be in a position to come forward. Of course, we will talk about way forward a little later, but the challenges has been seen as an opportunity. So various things like, various tools that are there used for the process of school management, whether it is in the admission, whether it is in the teaching, whether it is in even the assessment. So even those who had no online assessment, how did so many of our schools manage? Send the questions, because once we do the teaching, we want to know whether the assessment has happened. So we tell the students, you have 20 minutes, write in your notebook, take a snap and send back to us. So then we are able to see how the thing goes. But what about those students who do not have a internet connectivity? We call the teachers call up the students and say, please turn to this page number, see what are the questions there, how much you are able to attempt, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, you come back and call back, and the respective student read out the answer that is printed. So there is a lot of innovation that has been done in various situations. But one thing which I would like to say that is, even from my personal learning, when we are sitting in some remote office, the connectivity with the respective school goes only when we go and visit the school, which happens once in a month, but not all the schools can be done. We are in 16 states. It's impossible for us to do everything in 1 month. But because of this opportunity, we were able to connect with all the teachers almost practically every month. And this is something which was a really eye-opener for us, how we can improve the connectivity among people, and because of which we also see the outcome. And yes, there was an incident of various state government banning primary school and others. But finally, what is the outcome of primary level required? Simple reading, writing, speaking, and numeracy. We don't need a textbooks to teach that. But what happens is when many of the policies come, when some schools go to the extreme. Let's start online education because it's very important. Students, please start it because you start your school normal at 7 o'clock. So let's have the first session at 7 o'clock and it goes on till all 7 sessions or 6 sessions, all periods goes on. So people go to the extreme. So then some of them come into the banning mode. We try to ensure that the screen time is much less because we also realize practically 100% of our students are accessing online teaching only through mobile, not through laptop and desktop. And having worked for a short time in eye care world, I'm a little frightened of our students, eyesight that if we expose them to more than a certain number of hours. So we have fixed 1 hour, 2 hours, depending on the type of classes we cannot have. And we are not focusing, especially in the lower classes, the textbook teaching. I don't think we really need a textbook to teach them how to read and write. That's personally, I believe in that as such. And we are able to demonstrate with our able teachers who are there. So that's what I feel. We do not have too many challenges. We have more of opportunities at this time.
Okay, that's good to see. It's also, I think what's really heartening at a personal level for me is just to see the optimism and the confidence that's coming. I feel it's very comforting to the teacher community that this is possible. It might take later than sooner for some of us, but it is really possible to do this. Anshul, before I come to you, I'm going to again give you an additional information and slightly modify the question. There's a quick poll I'm going to launch. Anshul, participants, if you can see it, what has been your experience of online classes? Have you found them effective? And then I'll come back to your prompt, Anshul. I feel this is a question where a lot of people will have differing opinions. Another 20 seconds. Okay. Just quickly sharing that results to you, the panelists and the attendees for your reference, and we'll kind of see that almost 71% have found it to be effective. But I think a good percentage, which is close to 29%, are either reluctant or are unsure about it as well. So Anshul, just coming back to you and using this poll as a particular prompt, right? Like what is it DPS has done from your perspective and in the last 3 months, especially to make online learning effective? In fact, one of the questions which we've got, I think from Stephanie, if I'm not mistaken, is that do you think this will have also a repercussion on how teachers are trained in the future as part of their pre-service training, like in terms of how are they going to manage online learning or blended learning? So if you can comment on both of it, like what are the steps you all have taken to make online learning more effective? And do you see this as something that's going to influence pre-service training of teachers as well? Anshul, you're on mute. I'm going to request you to unmute.
Yeah. Sorry, just a couple of points that I noted down that I would like to talk of before I come to the question about online learning and training. Is that I just go back to 2016 where I was implementing online fee payment for our schools across the schools, about total of about 12,000 children, and there was a very strong resistance from within our school management, you know, about not doing online because people are used to be paying a certain way. And I was advocating that the technology is available and we should get rid of this, asking parents to come to the fee counters. Anyhow, the story went on for about 6 months. We run the schools in a fairly democratic manner, so I don't want to be very autocratic about it. So for 6 months, the discussions went on, and eventually I had no choice but to uh, stop the cash process. And what I realized was that 99% of fee came in within 2 weeks, which was much greater. Now, having said that, what I'm trying to focus and emphasize is on that we ourselves are our biggest impediments at times, and most times. In fact, we stop ourselves. If coronavirus had not come, it would have taken us 10 years to start thinking about delivering education online. There was so much of an issue getting fee online. Forget doing classes online, or forget getting onto blended learning. So if we embrace the change, then there are not many issues. But the problem is that we keep on resisting the change because we are so used to a certain way of doing things, and we always think that they can't be any better. But technology has time and again proven us wrong, because technology has time and again given us a better way of calling a cab, of making payments, of ordering food, and watching movies at home, be it Netflix or whatever, and now learning. I want to add to some of our panelists. Absolutely, teachers are and have been the heroes. There is no doubt about it. Yes, we have Microsoft Teams and we have Google and we have other software available, but it's the people who are using it to deliver for the good of the children. Um, there are many challenges that have come across us. For example, we run a residential school, and today I can tell you that the school has been running for the last 3 months without a single kid on campus, and it's a boarding school. So, this condition has taken away the entire element of residential out of the residential school, but the school is still running like a regular school. Uh, the focus right now has to be on upgradation of IT infrastructure as schools continue to learn about how to deliver online and teachers continue to learn about how to teach online. One thing we noticed was that in the last 3 months, the collaboration among teachers, even from the same school and across the schools, has been immense, and that's been very heartwarming. Right now, we face the next challenge that we face in as school educators is the challenge of assessments, because the month of April, May, June have gone. Schools are opening up now in July, and traditionally we are used to having the first set of examinations, unit tests in the month of July, August, and the first half yearlies or terminals in September. And I believe that schools will not be opening up before that. So the next biggest challenge for schools is going to be, how do you assess? Do you hold an examination or not? And of course, that's also, and right as we speak, as we do this webinar, we are in constant brainstorming sessions with our teachers, our principals, on what to do. In terms of, every process, be it academic or administrative, has had to be redrawn, from taking attendance of teachers to taking student attendance. So it's been a challenge in every in every fashion. It's been a challenge to get the get the students, get the teachers, the parents accustomed to that online learning still exists. It does exist. And what has not been helpful is that some governments have come out and said, or had come out and said, that online learning is no schooling and hence you don't need to pay the fees. So they've been conflicting and reports and instructions being issued by certain government departments. I don't think that's very mature of them. But of course, be it screen time, 2 hours is good enough. Don't teach primary kids, or 5 hours is less. Initially I came across some parents who were very proud when they shared with me that their school was actually teaching 10 hours a day. And my school's really gotten it. They know how to deliver online. They're starting at 7 o'clock in the morning and grilling the child till 2. So that was supposed to be a good thing. But eventually, everyone has been all over the place with this. In terms of what value and we have learned as we have delivered this learning online. We started from zero because we never used to deliver a single lesson online. Although we had the technology, it was the same resistance, and most schools, in fact, never did online learning. So we started from zero, and we delivered. We understood what time to start, how to train the teacher to take attendance, how to train the teacher to what the teacher should do in the first 5 minutes of a class. Just kind of checking in with every student, how you get into the topic, how you discuss it, how you create more involvement amongst the students, and how you end up with a fair understanding of what the learning has been. In the last 10 days, as I shared with you and everyone before, that we have been going through a teacher training. And the teacher training is not about only how to teach online. This teacher training is all about the entire revamping of the curriculum, making it more learner-centric, making it more inquiry-based on the lines of what the IB does, right? I believe another boon in disguise is going to be that, and I really hope so, that the focus on marks comes down and the focus on learning goes up. And I do believe that this first assessment that is planned in the months of July and August will create a challenge in front of all schools and teachers, because they will not be able to they will not be able to ensure that no cheating is done. And hence their focus hopefully will go away from marks to the fact that, okay, it's not about scoring 100. The fact is that he's understood the concept, so he's okay. And that may turn out to be the biggest boon in disguise of this coronavirus. So as I was saying that there are lots of avenues, lots of areas of education that we still have to understand and learn. And although when I say we, I mean not only just DPSG schools, but all of us. So we probably have understood a little bit about screen time as to what is good and what is too long and what is too short. We might have understood how to deliver. We will now have to understand how to assess. And so every day is going to be learning for us. And the only way forward is to keep on brainstorming about it.
Thanks, Anshul. Actually, that's a great segue to my next question. And this is particularly, Anshul, can I request you to mute for a minute? Thank you. So this is a great segue for the next question, and particularly want to direct it to Diksha and then Ravi, and again back to you, Anshul. I think usually the three pillars, that is your curriculum, your syllabus, and your assessments, kind of come together to define your expectations of what that learning or schooling is going to be. So two parts to this question, and maybe Diksha, you can again start us off. One is, how is syllabus, assessments, and curriculum going to look like for your school this year? And just building off of it, like, how are the next 2 years going to look like for the Kalyani school? Is there a talk around when it's going to open? What's the possibility there? How does the next 2 years look?
Oh, Ashwath, I hope it's not going to be a 2-year long process. I think more than anything, it's the children want to be back in school, have interactions with their friends. This is a very artificial way of learning. I know there are a lot of parents who believe in homeschooling, but that's a very small percentage. We still send our children to school because socializing is a very important skill to learn. And that only happens when children interact with other peers of their own age, learn to settle scores, settle differences, make friends, learn to network. So those are very important skills which cannot be learned online. So, the sooner we can get back to normalcy, the better it was. But having said that, we will have to take it, day by day, week by week, depending on what the situation is. One can only hope that this pandemic goes away like, a miracle. But in the meantime, I think for our primary section, we are definitely not looking at assessment as the major goal for the coming time. I think what we want to do is learning, look at learning outcomes. And that we do a lot by when we have our live classes. So the synchronous and asynchronous has to be balanced. When we have our live classes, we do a lot of, our teachers do a lot of interactions with the children to kind of understand what their learning has been, whether they are following what the lessons are, or the videos that are being shared, and also to just assess only their reading and writing skills. Because I think at a primary level, if they, we do mental math, we do reading, popcorn reading, we do little bit of assessment of writing skills, where the children send back a written work to the teacher. I know that it's not completely, there could be parents helping out, where telling their children what to write, what to do. It can't be 100% foolproof, but at least to some extent we can understand where the children are. With higher grades, where what we've been doing is a flipped classroom, where teachers send in some syllabus for the children to kind of go through, and topics for them to learn, or through videos or through YouTube links and etc. So the children have to study a little bit, and then when they come to the live classrooms, the teachers ask them questions to assess whether they are understanding and following. There are a lot of loopholes, because some children just say that they don't have connectivity, or they couldn't attend the class, or make excuses. But at the end of the day, they have to realize that this is for their own benefit, and if they don't put in a little extra effort at this time, they're going to lose out when schools reopen and proper assessments start.
Thank you, Diksha. I think I just dropped off there for a minute, and I think these are one of the struggles of technology and learning.
Yes.
I'm going to extend the same question to Ravi as well, right? Ravi, how does syllabus, curriculum, and assessment play out for you this year? What do you see as the future for the next 2 years when it comes to the foundation schools?
Very interesting questions. Again, I like to learn from history, which was my worst subject in school, but it's my favorite right now. Let's look at what happened in the 1918 pandemic, 2 years. 1967, 68, I think 2 years. Before that, 58, 59, I think 2 years. And we are here now in 2020. I don't think it's going to take less than 2 years. And in fact, it's probably going to take more than that, because we are flattening the curve. Those days, there was no concept of flattening the curve. So I think this whole thing about a blended learning approach is going to become the norm. You're going to have a combination of online, offline. So that is one prediction I would probably make about the future. The second thing, again, I would agree with Diksha on that, is online learning the best way? No. As far as children are concerned, you do need a wide range of other interactions. When you come to school, you're interacting with friends, you have arguments, you have fights, you build networks for life. And so there are a lot of social skills that are kind of hard to build online. So all of us have to figure out if online is the only way to go, then how are we going to compensate for that? I don't think I have an answer. Most people don't have an answer. Right. Coming to assessment, now that's an interesting question. So there are two parts to this whole thing. And before the lockdown happened, like I mentioned, we had already done an assessment. What we did is we went back to our parents and said, look, we're going to do this assessment and it's going to be done online. Your kid will take it from home, but it's an honor system. It's up to you, right? See, the question is, who is the assessment for? Is it for the child? Is it for the parent? Or is it for the teacher? Who are we really assessing when you give an assessment to a child? For us, it is like when you give an assessment to a child, it is more of an information to the teacher that, look, these are the areas where I need to plug gaps. It's not really that the child has not learned. It's that there are some children where I, as a teacher, need to now focus and plug those gaps. There's a lot of input that we actually get. So anyway, see, we conveyed a lot of this to our parents and they all agreed. And we actually had a phenomenal response to that. So when we analyzed the data, we realized that there was really no deviation on the online test as compared to the previous scores that we got. That means nobody actually cheated and their marks became super high when all the previous exams were, they didn't do really well. So we didn't see any of that happening at all actually. Now, so we will probably be continuing with the online honor system for up to grade 8. Now comes the question of grade 9, 10, 11, and 12. So over there, we need to be a little more formal in terms of the exam, and there are other technologies that you can use. For example, there is a technology, Swedish technology called exam.net. It's pretty cool actually. It's quite nice, and one can use that along with a combination with either Zoom or Google Meet or Microsoft Teams or any of these, and you can actually do a proctored exam using that. So people can actually write on a piece of paper. It can be scanned. There's a whole bunch of things you can actually do with it. So we will probably be using that going forward. One place where I would disagree with Diksha is on the flipped classroom side. Now, apart from schools, I actually also run a corporate training company, and we've been doing that for over a decade and a half. And I fundamentally believe that Indians are hardwired not to read before a class. So, and I think it starts very, very young. So most people, I feel, don't prepare before you come into a class. So going into that is probably, hitting my head against a wall. So we did not, I love the concept. I would have done it, but most people won't. So, so we didn't go that particular route. So today, the way we conduct our classes is that almost everything is done in the class. Any classwork is also done in the class. The concept of homework, it exists more in terms of if your classwork is not complete, then it flows over into the home. So that's what we do. The second thing I want to also point out at this point in time is when we had a chat with our parents, we figured that this whole concept of screen time is a very evasive beast. What is screen time? And if we are not teaching, what do kids do at that time when they are in lockdown? Right? There are two things that are happening. One, they are on the screen watching YouTube or watching TV or playing some games. So screen time is happening. But there is also another thing happening. Many parents have actually signed up, at least in the urban areas in our parent group that we follow. They've actually signed their kids up for additional classes through the private folks. So online screen time is actually happening, right? So if we plug in 1-2 hours of online screen time and replace it with all the other screen time, I feel that they're not actually causing damage. In fact, we are actually helping them through a much more structured process of learning. So yeah, so as a summary, I think all of us have to adapt to the new future. Schools will open, but there will be a hybrid learning. Online learning will be there. There will be some amount of school learning. We have to leverage the best of both of these going forward. Assessments till grade 8, anyway, we have to pass the students. Best way is to, as per current technologies, is to co-opt parents, have an honor system, use data analytics to figure out who is unnecessarily, doing things that they're not supposed to do. And use technology again for grade, let's say 9, 10, 11, 12 to do proctored exams. So that would be my thought.
Thanks, Ravi. Thanks for sharing that. It's quite interesting. Even when what I've heard in my experience is that there are parents who are like, we need to get about our work. So writing to schools and teachers saying, how can you engage them throughout the day, throughout the summer? And then we have other set of parents who are like, this is actually not really healthy or productive for the child. There needs to be some break. Anthony, but before I come to you, I'd like to get even Anshul's thoughts on how DPS is looking at their approach to assessment, syllabus, and curriculum for this year. And particularly, how does the next 2 years look like for you?
Okay, so I think the blended learning is here to stay. This is a permanent change. Schools will open, and as some of the panelists have said, citing past experiences of pandemic, I also think this is like a 2-year scenario. Schools, as our health infrastructure becomes strong, and if it does, then it'll enable us to open up our schools, our malls, because the fear of falling ill will reduce. But if our health infrastructure is not strong, then we would rather prevent the infection than cure it, right? Schools actually will eventually have to grow out of their love of grading and marking children. Teachers love to use the red pen and crisscross the copies and give marks. Parents love to read the marks that children have gotten, and then the next packed question to their child is, so how much did your friends get? I've also done that at times, and my daughters, their response to me is that, why do you care? You're not their father. So, so schools will have to get out of their love of marking and start pushing for learning. I believe initially, as we figure out which systems to use for assessments, and assessments is actually an assessment of the child and the teacher, not just the child. So as we get into this cycle of understanding assessments, I believe schools will have no choice but to start focusing on the concept building and the learning. The education goals will have to change a little bit from performance to understanding. And blended learning, as I said, is here to stay. It will change the way schools are run in the future, even after this pandemic ends, which I believe which could be 2 to 3 years time. And by that time, we'll be so used to, doing partial work online, partial work while in the school. Yes, our children will miss out on the peer-to-peer learning that happens, physically for some time. And I think we have no choice but to go through that period, because it's not worthy risking our lives for that. But eventually, our kids will pick up the peer-to-peer learning, the physical development, the sports and all that when they go to school. Too early for me to say, but it could even be possible that we go back to a 6-day school in the future. But the online element will be a part of it somewhere. We don't know where yet, but it will be blended learning. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Anshul. Anthony, I'm just going to come back to you now with a very different question, because in the Q&A, there's been quite a number of questions around, how is it going to play out? The idea of online learning is such a limited concept because such a small percentage of schools can really enable this. Diksha has spoken about her challenges about how do they work with kids who are from economically weaker backgrounds. So if you could shed light into what are the non-internet practices you all have adopted? How does this work out with students who are first generation learners? If you can spend a little bit time just sharing your experience and how you all have gone, beyond this, beyond Zoom, beyond WhatsApp. There have been ideas around should we use radios and TVs, but how effective are these spaces? I'm sure these are conversations you all have already had. So if you could just spend a couple of minutes, it'll be great.
Yeah, thanks. I'm very happy the participants asked this question, and I was trying to answer some of the questions as well simultaneously. Then I realized it's good to talk to everyone on this. Yes, definitely. More than 50% of our rural area may not have the connectivity. So when I say connectivity, continued connectivity. 50% may have good connectivity, but not more than that. Jokingly, many of us say, we talk about 5G, 4G, but in the rural area, it's just 2G or just G, and not necessarily have the internet connectivity. Having said that, because of this lockdown situation, instead of one channel in the TV or in the radio, many of the television channels have got into school education. So they broadcast. It is not an interactive mechanism. So I do agree with when Ravi says if we reduce our screen time of our students, it's not that they are not going to have a screen time. Definitely they may get into TV and all those things. But unfortunately, many of the rural area where we are working it's the only screen that they have is the mobile for the interactive method. So we have given them, we have charted out all the timetable of the television, which are the subjects for which classes. So we start telephoning to the students. So one of the questions from the participants were, how are you going to manage mathematics over the phone? Yeah, it's a very good question. But we can use this various methods. In many of the state governments, I don't want to name the state government, there are many of them are doing it. They're using broadcasting as radio as the option. In one of our area I think in Punjab, it has been done from the local Gurudwara. There is an announcement happening, and all the students in the village are learning. So there are various ways and means. Only thing we need to come out. In Jharkhand, I'm aware that some of the government school teachers, they are requesting all the villages to send their children to the field. So they have enough space there. There is what we call social distancing norms are kept, and they have a teaching of small group. There are a lot of wonderful things that is happening in terms of making use of student engagement. I think many of the teachers, schools have understood that engagement is the key now, not necessarily textbook completion. But I do understand the pressure of the schooling system, all of us together, because assessment pattern has not changed. Assessment pattern is the same thing. Okay, by heart and come and write. And all of you will get 101% out of 100 marks. That is how the situation is going on. Pun intended, 101%, because once in Delhi University, I think by mistake it has come as 101% is the cutoff, not 100%. I don't know how they get more than 100%. So unfortunately, the assessment pattern has not changed. And so we have to live with the policies that are there. We have to prepare the children for the normal examination. Having said that, the learning has to happen. This is the best time to teach them skill-based learning rather than content-based learning. We are doing also the assessment, what I talked to you earlier through WhatsApp or over the phone. We are having an open book exam, but the questions asked are different. Just because by reading the question book, the textbooks, they are not able to answer the question. If looking at the question, if they are going to open the textbook and say, let me write the answer, they are not going to do it. So look at the assessment at this time, not just content vomiting out. Let us look at the application understanding level, higher level of order thing. So if you can change the assessment pattern, definitely whether it is rural or urban, it works. With regard to the area of rural area, what you had asked the question, we are using various methods of find out which are the local channels. We have already published to all the parents. Your student is studying in class 4. This is the schedule for the subject. 5 subjects you have. This is the time that you have to make sure your child should attend these classes. For last 2 years or so, in some schools about 1 year, we had something called phone mentoring happening with the parents. I think that has helped us very much into this difficult times. We used to have parent-teacher meeting, and we used to organize training for the parents how to use mobile for education purposes. So that has helped us to a great extent, I would say, in this scenario. We have also another concept that is there in the rural area, home mentor. Yes, there was one question from the panelists. Many of them are not educated, illiterate. They may be illiterate, but they are very clear about importance of education. We cannot say that just because they are illiterate, they are not interested in education. So what we have told the parents is, if you are not in a position to guide them, your elder child can they guide the sibling, or you have an uncle auntie, just talk over the phone to the child. Have you done the today's class? Have you watched this TV chapter? So that there is somebody to follow up on the child, to say, just like many of us who have children, like Anshul got the answer from her from his daughter about the assessment. That's a different thing. We also follow up with our children. Why are you not studying now? You have just finished one of the online class. Have you completed the homework? There is a kind of mentoring, what we call it. It may be follow up, it may be a mentoring. Similar concept we are looking at, how we can transform the villages, and we have got wonderful results. And because of which we feel the parents may be the first generation learners, but they are as convinced about education like any of us who may not be the first generation learners. And we have enough facilities. There are many initiatives that is coming out from different parts of the village, not necessarily from our own foundation. They are coming announcing. There is a set timetable. 10 o'clock, we are going to announce this class. So the teacher is going to announce through the mic, and all the students in their respective houses, they're coming and learning. So what is important is not what you use, whether you are ready to try different method is the major question that is there. Online is just one of the facts that can be done. I also agree with the other panelists, hybrid learning or blended learning is here to stay. But how are we going to go forward? Yes, we may call some of the students, especially who did not have any connectivity, more often to the school compared to the students who had online teaching, so that there is the digital divide has not increased the learning divide among our children. Because what we are as a Bharati Foundation mandate is to serve the underprivileged children, and the last 40% or 50%, that is our main focus. So we cannot afford to make sure that they are not learning. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Anthony. I want to be cognizant of the time, and we are moving towards the last few minutes. Just quickly from all the panelists who'd like to get closing thoughts, but also with a special focus towards safety and well-being. And when I talk about safety, I'm talking about a lot of fear around, the kind of content and the kind of exposure people get through the internet. Like, what are things that as a school you all are keeping in mind, and how are you all looking at well-being? So 3 things quickly, if we can go 30-40 seconds each panelist. Closing thoughts. How are you looking at safety, and how are you looking at well-being? Diksha, again, I'm going to request you to start.
Okay, thank you. I think safety, one of the reasons for choosing Microsoft Teams was the safety aspect, because each child has been given a ID, like a school ID, and they can only join in through that. So somewhere, so the safety is being taken care of through the system itself. And I think at the end of the day, a little monitoring has to be done by the parents to make sure that their children are not misusing the internet and not exploring things beyond the classroom. So unfortunately, we've had problems where parents are saying, there's too much expectation from us, and this is the teacher's job only. But this is not something any of us invited. But since it's something that is here to stay, we have to find the best solution for our children.
Thanks so much. I think empathy is such a big key. Though this is not the expectation, I think people need to rise beyond their comfort zone to just support each other. Thank you so much. Ravi, quickly to you, your closing thoughts. How are you approaching safety and well-being, online safety and well-being?
So one of the things that we did even before pre-COVID, I mean, every opportunity, every interaction that we get with parents, we always keep talking about how to protect their children, in an online world. And this was pre-COVID days. So we've been doing plenty of that actually. This is more of an education for the parents. So I think in that sense, they're already up the curve. But yes, we do use a password-based system. We need to make sure that nobody else is able to log in. And yes, there is also, whatever we say, there is the concept of screen time. And we need to be cognizant of the fact that you don't want to burden someone too much. There is a lot of data. For example, the rate at which you blink when you look at a screen is much lower than when you don't look at a screen. So there are impacts that there is an impact that actually takes place. So we need to be cognizant of those things and create a reasonable learning schedule for children. So.
Thanks, Ravi. Just making a note, remembering to blink. Anshul, quickly to you, if you can also just share your closing thoughts. How are you looking at well-being and online safety?
Firstly, as Diksha said, our choice of software was Microsoft Teams, safe and secure software with a lot of controls. And apart from that, it's a lot of educating the parents, the teachers, and the students of what they should and should not do. And that's the only way. Using the right links, getting them to safe and secure websites, and keeping them within the ecosystem of the software for use for online learning. That's the way you try to maintain safety. Keep in touch, talk to people. That's it.
Thank you. Thank you, Anshul, for that. Anthony, your closing thoughts? Anthony, you're on mute.
Child safety and school safety has been paramount in our system. All the teachers who join us go through a one-day training on 1 or 2 days of training of child safety in itself. And cybersecurity was one of the facts. Though many of our children did not have internet connectivity. At the same time, during this pandemic time, we have done a lot of activities around health and wellness, so that there is a lot of focus on how they need to protect themselves and take care, safety. A lot of workshops for the teachers, and for the teachers to the students and the parents on that aspect as such. Second, we also took care, making sure there's a virtual safety, like earlier speakers have already said. And of course, our main platform for teachers to students has been our new software, which is available with everyone, Teacher Team. They have been their major platform for make sure that teacher and student reach. And we even creating WhatsApp, especially in the senior group, we also divided gender-wise these WhatsApp group, so that there is no misuse of those numbers especially from a senior point of view. So all the boys are in one group and girls are in one group, so that there's phone number of the respective students are not received, at least through our schooling system. So we try to take care from a child perspective, all the activity that I mentioned. Once you get into a child-centeredness, I think safety will take care of itself, because it is centered around child safety. Thank you.
Thanks, Anthony. Thank you all. I think a lot of questions have come on, how do teachers manage? How do we know students are learning online? Just a quick update to the participants. This is just the first part where we brought in school owners and administrators. The next part of this webinar is actually getting into deeper discussions with parents and teachers, and hopefully some of these questions will be answered in greater detail there. I just want to close it out with a huge thank you to all of our panelists for taking out the time, sharing their experiences, being quite honest and open as well in terms of how they've responded and how they've kind of shared their what's worked for them and what hasn't, and what they've been holding close to. And I'll hand it over to you, Sanjay, to just close this out as well. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Diksha, Ravi, Anshul, and Anthony. It was really great. I mean, hearing as an outsider, I've been associated with the education sector for 4 years now. And many of these thoughts which were shared were very interesting, so things around self-learning opportunities, and, how do we build that and not just depend on the teachers to teach. The thought about engagement versus assessment, how does one build engagement with the students and look at assessment separately and, look at learning along with engagement. So very interesting thoughts. It was very nice to hear all of you, and thanks a lot for taking out time. It was a pleasure to hear all of you, and look forward to being in touch with all of you. Thanks a lot, audience. We had so lovely participation from so many people from across India. So very nice to have all of you and for some very good questions. And look forward to seeing you again in the next set of webinars. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ashwath. Thank you,
It's
Sanjay.
my pleasure.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. Thank you.